Yeah, so I guess. So, good morning, everyone. I hope you all are doing well and safe. I welcome you all to the STC India session, Gig Big, Building Habits and Mindsets that will find you success as a freelance writer. My name is Revati, and I am the city representative of the Trivandrum chapter of STC India. As people are still joining in, we will take a few minutes for some introductions. The Society for Technical Communication, popularly known as STC, is a global forum to exchange ideas and share knowledge, experiences, and best practices in the field of technical communications. The STC India chapter plays a key role in educating technical communication professionals in the country through learning sessions that impart information about the skills required to shape their careers. STC also works towards demonstrating the economic value delivered by technical communicators. The STC India annual conference is held each year in different cities, but this year, due to the pandemic, this year's conference will be going online. To know more about the conference, you can visit the STC India website. That's www.stc-india.org. STC India owes today's session to Technorites, who helped us in facilitating the Zoom session. Technorites is a leading company offering content services and quality courses in writing and communications. I hope most of the people have joined in, and now I'll move to the main part of today's session. Our speaker today is Mr. Shrikesh SV. Shrikesh has 14 plus years of experience, combined experience in writing and leadership. He joined EY in 2013 as an associate content editor and has since played key roles in content writing, design, and strategy. Presently, he is the BMC Agency Content Competency Leader Global Delivery Services and Global Score Writing and Style Leader. He leads a team of writers and editors and the company's global writing and style compliance process. Before EY, he was a successful freelancer for more than 6 years. When not at work, you will find Shrikesh hidden behind a book or watching movies. He also enjoys literary, film, art, and even temple festivals. Having known Shrikesh for a while now, I believe he's someone who has a very strong and positive sphere of influence, a personality that is both powerful and approachable at the same time. I'm extremely happy that he will be sharing his knowledge with us today. In the best interest of the session, I request all to mute yourselves. Please feel free to post your queries in the chat. Shrikesh, I'll keep track of the questions, and when you feel you want to take a pause, I can read out the questions for you. Okay? With that, I now hand over the mic to you, Shrikesh. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Revati. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I'll try my best to live up to those expectations that you have set here. So thanks, Revati, and thanks also to everyone that has joined. I know it's a Saturday morning. There are a lot of other things that you could have done, but you're here at this session, so thanks for joining. And I would just like Revati said, I would also like to thank Technorites for providing us this platform to have the session, and also STC India for creating this platform where we are all able to learn from each other. So thanks to everyone. And we'll just quickly jump into the session. The name of the session, as you can see, is Gig Big. It's about building habits and mindsets that will make you successful as a freelance content writer, right? So I was a freelance content writer for 6 to 7 years. And it was through my freelance writing profile that I landed up in a job in EY. And currently, like Revati said, I'm leading a team of writers and editors in EY. So in this session, there are a few things that we'll be taking a look at. This is the, so this is what we'll be discussing. We'll be talking about why most of us love writing, why you, me, and the rest of us love writing. We'll talk about how we can write well. We'll talk about how we can set great freelancing goals, thinking like an organization, Muda, Mura, Muri, building a personal brand, the power of networking. These are the things that we'll quickly touch upon. And, like I said earlier, I was working as a freelancer for 6 to 7 years. And when I tell people that I was working as a freelancer, I get a lot of questions, right? A lot of, questions that I usually get from people are around the sources from which I could get freelancing work, the different people that I partnered with to deliver work, how much did I charge per word or per page, per website, how much did I make every month, what is more profitable, freelancing or being employed? So these are some of the questions that I usually get. And what I want to tell you is that in this session, what we're going to talk about is the mindsets and habits that we'll need to be a successful freelancer. And when I interact with people who are aspiring freelancers, what I realize is that a lot of questions that I get from them is primarily because they look at freelancing the same way they look at employment. Being employed in a company and being a freelancer are two entirely different things. So when I was freelancing, there were things that I did, habits that I cultivated, mindsets that I developed that helped me do well as a freelancer. I'm going to share those with you right now in this session. And if there are freelancers in this group, if you have learned something in your freelancing journey, if there are habits that you've cultivated that has made you successful, please do share that and we can learn from each other. All right. So what I want to say is in this session, we are going to be talking specifically about mindsets and habits. All the other operational aspects that I just listed out, we might not discuss that in this session, but I'm happy to help you out with those. Maybe after this session, I'll share my contact information. If you're a freelancer, if you're trying to be a freelancer, there are challenges that you're running into, I'm happy to discuss that and help you out in whichever way I can, right? But the focus of this session is going to be on mindsets and habits. I'll share my learnings from my freelancing journey. Please feel free to, on the side chat, share yours as well. All right. So with that, we jump into the session. Okay. So this is a quote from Stephen King, right? I'll give you a few seconds to just go through this, and then we'll continue from there. So I'm just going on mute and giving you a few seconds to quickly go through this. I hope you've read through this. So Stephen King, one of the most successful writers, authors of all time, what he says is that through writing he did make a lot of money, but he didn't really do it for the money. He did it for the buzz of it. Right? He did it for the joy of it, which is really important. Right? It's important that we find joy in what we do for us to be successful at what we do. So, we are all from different backgrounds. We might have, we might have studied different subjects, but we're all here. What unites us all is the fact that we are all writing. Maybe we are technical writers or copywriters or content writers. We are all doing some kind of a writing or editing or proofreading. We are using language, using words, and that's what makes us writers, and that's what unites us. So my question to you all is, as we're speaking, please feel free to add your thoughts on the side chat. My question is, why do you love writing? Right? What is it about writing that you love? Right? Why are you a technical writer? Why are you a content or copywriter or a proofreader or whatever it is that you're doing? What is it that you love about writing? I would like to see your answers on the side chat. I'll also share some information on why I love writing in the following slides. But maybe we can take a minute or so to see what you love about writing and why you are in the profession that you're in. Okay, Revati says, let my thoughts flow. So as the thoughts are flowing, I'll just, okay, Shivani says it's expressing her thoughts that she loves. Metha gives me insights of new ideas. Any other thoughts? Allows me to pace and structure my thoughts, helps me express. While writing, I have to read a lot of material online. This knowledge broadens my horizons. Fantastic. That was from Vijay. And Kunal Imagining things or work and converting them to words is exciting. Yes. So Priya says, love sharing my knowledge, the whole process of writing, research, and thinking. Awesome. Anyone else wants to share any other thoughts on why they love writing? Okay, so we're all in agreement that we don't really love writing for the money it gives us. We love writing because of the joy it gives us, because of the buzz we get out of writing. Now, my next question to you is, because we're all working as writers, we're all working with words, working with languages. We're basically playing with words and sentences and languages. What is a language? A way of communication, says Shivani. Language is a tool to communicate, Tripurni. It's a medium of expression. Manisha, medium to communicate the information. Shruti, thoughts expressed in a way that others can understand. Supriya, great. Any other thoughts from anyone? A medium to connect with others, very interesting. A common ground. These are all really interesting definitions. Great, wonderful definitions. Thank you for sharing that. Very often, when we ask people what language is, they say that it's a tool that we use to communicate. This is the most common definition of language. And in this slide, the next, I'm basically going to be talking about why I love writing and what is it about languages that really excites me. Okay. So when we talk about language, people say that language is a medium of communication. It's a tool that you use to communicate. I kind of have a slightly different perspective about that, because when you say that language is a tool, what we're saying that when we use the word tool, what we are actually implying is that it exists outside of us, right? Tool is something that you can take, you can use, and then you can leave it back. But language is not something that exists outside of us. If you kind of take some time to think about it, you might say that language exists inside of us. It's more than a tool that you take, use, and leave away. But if you even think deeper, you will realize that language isn't something that exists inside of us. It's something that we exist within, right? So there is this famous linguist and philosopher called Ludwig Wittgenstein. I might be pronouncing some parts of his name incorrectly, but he said, the limits of the language are the limits of my mind. All I have is what I have words for. Maybe people who have studied linguistics might know about him, right? So if you think very carefully, you'll understand that language is not something that exists within us or something that we can use it as a tool. Language is something within which we exist. So the experiences that we go through in this world are defined the way they are defined because our language has a certain level of detail to it, right? So what we're saying is that there are more than 7,000 languages in the world, and each of these languages have different levels of detail. They're all differently structured. So the language that I use to a large extent helps me define the experience that I go through in this world, right? So I can give you maybe a very simple example. I might even be risking oversimplification here, but just to try to help you understand this concept, I'll take the example of maybe colors, right? Um, in different languages, there are different number of color words, right? You have red, blue, green, and all those colors. It's not the same in all languages. It's different in different languages. Some languages have words for colors. Some languages don't have words for certain colors. Let's assume, hypothetically, that my language does not have a color for maroon, right? Maybe I see maroon, or in my language, maroon is also red, right? So when I look at maroon, I'm basically categorizing it as red. I might still see maroon, right? My eyes are actually helping me see maroon, but the way I perceive it, the way I define maroon is basically as red, right? So even though we are all able to see all the different colors, the way we categorize these colors, the way we define these colors is actually dependent on the language that we speak, right? So this is a very oversimplified example of how language defines our experiences. But if you think deeply about it, you will understand, you will realize that language isn't the tool that we use to communicate. It's something that defines our experiences in this world, right? And as you can see on the screen, there are more than 7,000 languages in the world. And this is a very conservative estimate. And why is it a conservative estimate? Is because there are a lot of dialects in the world. Some dialects are seen as dialects, some dialects are seen as languages. So let's say that there is a language A and a language B. Maybe B is a child of A. For people speaking language A, B might look like a dialect. For people speaking language B, A might look like an entirely different language. So whenever linguistics, I understand, they count the number of languages, they go for conservative numbers. So 7,000 is a very, very conservative estimate, right? And language, to a large extent, is what makes us humans. Now, you might say that, even animals communicate. It's not just humans that use languages. Birds and animals also communicate. Of course, they do communicate. But the question is, can we say that what they communicate is language, or is it just a medium of communication, right? Their medium of communication is not as well defined as ours. It doesn't have the level of detail the human languages have, right? So there are two things that separate the forms of communication animals and birds have from the language that humans have. Okay, and that is what you see on the screen. One is called discrete infinity and the other one is called displacement. So when we say discrete infinity, what we're saying is that with the discrete set of words and letters, we are able to come up with an infinite number of combinations of information or infinite number of ideas, right? So we only have a certain number of letters in the English language, for example, but with this set of letters, we can come up with an infinite number of ideas, or with a set of words, we can come up with an infinite number of ideas. That's something that's really special and unique to the human language, right? Again, I'm giving you an oversimplified example just in the interest of time. For example, someone says, Srikesh said something. And you can add to it by saying, Revati said, Srikesh said something. And then you can add further to it, say, Vijay said, Revati said, Srikesh said something. So you're basically adding on to it and increasing the length of the idea, coming and making it more and more complex. So, and this oversimplified example, it's just to basically illustrate to you the fact that with the human language, you have a limited number of words, you might have a limited number of letters, but you can leverage that to come up with an infinite number of ideas. So that's called discrete infinity. And the second thing about the human language, what is unique about the human language is called displacement. If you look at birds and animals, they communicate about things that are more or less in the present, things that are real, physically real, but that is not the case with human language. You don't really have to communicate about the present. You can communicate about things in the past, things that might come up in the future. You can create your own imaginary world and talk about things in the imaginary world, right? So when we say our language supports displacement, what we're saying is that we don't always have to talk about things that are more or less in the present. We can talk about things in the future, things in the past, things that are imaginary. For us to communicate, we don't really have to talk about things that are physically real and things that actually exist, right? These are things that make the human language really, really unique. So there are quite a number of languages in the world, more than 7,000 languages, and it's the languages that help us define the experiences that we have in this world, the way we are experiencing it. And human language is what makes humans humans, because it is very different from the styles of communication that animals and birds use. Only humans can come up with an infinite number of ideas with a discrete set of words and letters, and it is only through the human language that you can talk about things in the past, things in the future, and also things that are not physically real. So these are some really interesting aspects of the human language that I have found interesting. If you have found something interesting, please just feel free to share that on the side chat. We can all just talk about it and learn from each other. So these are things that I've really found interesting about languages and words, and this is basically the reason that I really love writing and working with languages and words. Okay, so if I need to summarize what we just discussed, it is important to find out what you love about what you do. So Stephen King says that his the money that he made from writing, it might have helped him buy a house, pay for his children's education, but he never did it for the money, right? So it's important to find out what you love about what you do. Find out what you love about writing, because as you can see on the screen, if you can do it for the joy, you can do it forever. So before jumping in on a freelancing journey, before jumping in on any profession, it is important to find out what you love about it, and do what you're loving, because if you can do it for the joy, for the love of it, you can do it forever. All right. So as we are having this conversation, please feel free to post your questions on the side chat. Revati can take a look at it and share it with me. I'm also looking at the chat as we're speaking. We can discuss your questions as well. Okay. Now there is this question of, is it an art or a science? Is writing an art or a science? Is it a talent that you're born with, or a skill that you can learn and acquire and master? What do you think? Is it an art or a science? Is writing an art or a science? Is it a talent or a skill? Any thoughts? A combination of both. Skill that can be developed. Writing in an engaging manner as an art. Both. It is intrinsic and yet needs science to able to write coherently. Nice, very interesting definition. So I think most of us will agree. We'll say that writing is both maybe an art and a science. So Shivani says an art that makes our thoughts flow the way we imagine. Yeah. A perfect blend of art and science. Okay. All right. So I think most of us agree that writing is a mix of both art and science, a mix of both talent and skill. Some people have a way with words. They're really attracted to words. Sometimes you might feel that words are attracted to them. So there is an element of art and talent involved. At the same time, there is also an element of science involved, because I think, like Supriya said, you can have this talent of writing, and at varying degrees. People can be talented at varying degrees in the art of writing. But I'm sorry. But at the same time, you can learn to improve how you write, because a lot of great writers have lived and died, and they have documented how you can write really, really well, right? So it's a talent that some people are born with. It's also a skill that you can learn and develop, right? And how can you develop the skill of writing really well? And that's something we are going to take a look at in the next couple of stages. Just giving you a quick overview of how you can really improve your writing. The first way to improve your writing uh, is to read great writers. So there is this line, which is, good writers read good writers, right? If you want to be a good writer, it is important that we read good writers. So if you want to be a good movie director, obviously you will watch a lot of great movies that were created by the greatest directors of all time. If you are it applies to any art or craft. If you want to be really good at something, you would have to learn from people who have done it in the past, the greatest people in your profession. So if you want to be a good writer, it's important that you read good writers. And I'm just sharing with you, maybe you can make a note of it, some of the names of the greatest copywriters that ever lived. And not just people that actually lived and did some great copywriting, but people who actually have documented what works and what doesn't work. So books by books by people like William Zenzer, David Ogilvy, Strunk White. These are some amazing books about writing that they've written. And sorry, sorry, I'm having a bad throat. So these are some amazing books about writing. There are some amazing books about writing that they've written, and by learning from them, you can really understand what makes good copy, what makes a bad copy. So there are very definite processes and steps that the great writers that have lived on this planet have documented to help you create copy that actually works, right? Copy that sells, copy that moves, copy that communicates really well. So whatever it is that your objective is, there is a definite scientific way to accomplish it. So while writing is a talent that some of us are born with, it's also a skill that you can develop by reading great writers, right? And then the second idea that I want to present to you is reading for writing, right? So I'm sorry, can you please give me a second? Let me have a sip of water. Right, sorry about that. So in order to learn to write well, it's important to read great writers. Good writers read good writers. And also, there is this idea called reading for writing. When we read, most of the time we read for information. We just quickly glance through pages, paragraphs, and sentences, and we get information from what we're reading. But if you're a writer, in addition to getting information, what is also important is that you read for writing. So reading for writers is different from reading for, something else, reading for people in other professions. And for lack of a better word, I've called it critical reading, which is reading to understand how it's written than to understand what is written, right? So when I say reading to understand how it's written, I would like to give you an example. When you're reading a sentence, there are certain words that the author has used, right? So what you'll have to do is pause and think about the words that the author has used to see why the author has used a certain word. Why has the author used a certain type of punctuation? Why is the sentence of this length? Why has he or she varied the sentence lengths in a certain way? So it's basically called critical reading. So I call it critical reading. It's basically analyzing the content that you're reading and not just, assimilating the information that is there in the content. So by doing this, you'll be able to learn a lot about writing unconsciously. So says conscious analysis leads to unconscious learning. So reading for writing is different from reading for gaining information. And when you're reading for writing, you basically analyze the words and sentences and the punctuations and all of that, and also examine how you would have communicated the same information. Let's say David Ogilvy, says something. You're reading his book, and there's some information that is there. You analyze what he has written, why he has written something in a certain way, and at the same time, think about how you would communicate the same information. What kind of sentences would you use? What would be the choices of your words? And why is it that you're using a certain word and the author is using a certain other word? Is it because you were born and brought up in a certain country? Is it because you were educated in a certain way? Are there other books that you're reading or movies that you're watching that are influencing you? So this kind of analytical, critical reading is really helpful for us in improving your writing. So writing is a talent. At the same time, it's a skill that you can develop. And in order to be great at writing, it's important to read great writers. Remember, good writers read good writers. It's also important to do some critical reading, which is basically reading to understand how it's written rather than what is written. Because when you analyze consciously the content, you will learn a lot of things about writing unconsciously, right? Now, so all this reading and learning, it's all focused around learning. And there are two types of learning that we do. One is learning for compliance, and the other one is learning for growth. And when I say learning for compliance, is basically learning if there is a need to learn. If you're working for a certain company and you need to be onboarded on a project, you might have mandatory training to attend. So you attend the training because you want to be in compliance with the processes, right? Or you might want a promotion, and it might be mandatory that people who want to be promoted have a certain degree. So you might go ahead and earn that degree. That's learning for compliance. And the other learning that we need to do that a lot of us don't do is learning for growth. So it's basically voluntary learning for growth. And more important, while learning for compliance is important, what is even more important is the learning conscious voluntary learning for growth. And you know, if you look at it very carefully, uh, for professionals like us, learning is the biggest competitive advantage, because one, that's something that not a lot of people do. Learning for growth is something that not a lot of people do. And two, everything other than learning are skills that are more or less common for most people, right? So learning is the biggest and one of the strongest competitive advantage. So it's important for us to move from just learning for compliance and add learning for growth into our routine. So it might be half an hour a day or 1 hour a day, and it can add up to a lot of time and a lot of learnings, because learning is a really great competitive advantage. So we need to shift from learning for compliance to learning for growth. And this is what I have to say. Learn writing, because it's a talent. While it's a talent, it's also a skill that we can develop and make that learning a habit. Now you might, you're all working in different companies. You might have heard managers say that I don't care about what you do, I just need results, right? So it's a great thing to be focused on results. But if you also think about it carefully, it's the habits that you have that generate results, right? So habits is equal to results. So uh, what I want to say is you make learning a habit, and automatically you'll start seeing the results, right? So that's what I have to basically say about learning. So we talked about why I love writing, why you love writing. We talked about some interesting aspects of the human language, and then we talked about learning. We looked at some of the greatest authors that ever lived and why it's important for us to learn. We talked about learning for growth versus learning for compliance, and most importantly, it's important that we make learning a habit, because habits equate to results. Okay. And the second thing about becoming a freelancer is setting your freelancing goals. During my conversations with aspiring freelancers, um, this is an area that I really struggle a lot with. Um, so when people tell me that they want to become a freelancer, they're often motivated by a lot of different reasons. It could be that they assume freelancing is a more lucrative career option than a full-time employment. Maybe they believe freelancing gives you more freedom. Maybe they believe it gives you more work-life balance. So a lot of different reasons why people think freelancing is great. But often people also to struggle to clearly articulate their freelancing goal. Why is it that you want to become a freelancer? So that clear articulation of their goal is very often lacking. So it's important to set very clear freelancing goals. That's what I am coming to, right? And I can tell you an example of how to actually set a really good goal. I don't know how many of you would have heard about this idea of setting up SMART goals, right? You might have a dream, you might have an ambition. Now it's important that if you want to realize the dream, realize the ambition, make the dream come true, that you have to convert that into a goal, right? And which is where the SMART goal comes into play, right? SMART goal is basically a specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound goal. So SMART, right? It's a SMART goal. So we need to set SMART goals. We need to convert those ambitions and dreams into specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound goals, right? For example, my ambition or dream could be that I want to become rich, which is a good goal, which is a good dream, good ambition. But it's a very high level, very vague goal, right? How do I convert this into a specific, measurable, or a SMART goal, right? So when you convert a dream or an ambition into a smart goal, the chances of you achieving that dream, ambition, or goal is more likely. So I can say, instead of saying that I want to become rich, I can say that I want to make a certain amount of money in a certain period of time. Let's say that I want to make 20 lakhs, right? I want to make 20 lakhs in the next 6 months. So it's a specific goal in a specific period of time. So it's a specific goal. Is it a measurable goal? Of course, it's a measurable goal. By the end of 6 months, I would be able to understand whether I have met it or not. Or every month I can keep track of how much money I'm making, and I can find out if I'm on track or if I'm behind or ahead. I can get all that information, so I can know based on my sources of income whether it's achievable and realistic. And because I have set a time limit, which is basically 6 months, I would be able to make sure I will have a very clear idea on when I need to achieve that goal. So my idea or dream of becoming rich, my ambition of becoming a rich person, is now translated into a specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound goal. And this would help us stay on track in a much better way. And when you convert these ambitions and dreams into smart goals, the chances of you achieving it are highly likely. All right. So for freelancers, when you're going into freelancing, it's really important to be clear about what you expect from freelancing. What is it that you want? Do you want do you want more freedom? Do you want more money? Do you want to just be able to work on a variety of projects? What is your goal from freelancing? How do you measure success when you're going into freelancing is something that we all need to be very, very clear about. All right. So now, when we started this presentation, I told you that there are some questions that people usually ask when they come to know that I worked as a freelancer, and those questions are usually around what will you do when a client doesn't pay you, how do you make sure the client pays you, how much do you charge per word, how much did you make every month, what is more lucrative, freelancing or being employed full time. So these are some of the questions that I usually get. But we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about why these questions arise. But before that, I want to pose this question to you, and which is, when does an organization come into existence? When do you think an organization comes into existence? Can you just type your answers on the side chat if you don't mind? So Revati says an organization comes into existence when there is a clear vision and ambition to achieve something. Okay. Any other thoughts? Vijay says when it produces the goods and services that its mission and vision purport to create. When there may be more than one role a person required. Interesting. Devasri, when there is demand for the niche service. Shruti, people from different stream work together to achieve the same goal or to produce different services. Nice, very good. When the idea is incorporated into a company in an official manner, say Supriya, Kunal, when small ideas start expanding to bigger pictures. Really, really amazing definitions from all of you. And one way of looking at when an organization comes into existence is that an organization comes into existence when one person realizes that he or she is not able to meet an objective by himself or herself, right? When one person is not able to meet a goal on their own, then they might add people and an organization would start forming. Again, I'll oversimplify it, and just to help you understand, I'll give you an oversimplified example. Let's say that you want to maybe go somewhere in the morning, so you have a car. You want to take your car and you want to maybe go grocery shopping, right? So you start your car and you open your gate, and then you realize that the latch of the gate is stuck. You're not able to really open the latch. It's really, really stuck. You try your best, just not opening, and you're basically stuck. You are not able to open the gate, and that's when you see a couple of young guys passing by. You call them and you ask for their help. They come over and they help you open the latch, open the gate, and off you go. So you actually got help from a couple of people. So your objective was to basically go to the grocery shop. It was not the objective of those two young guys to go for you to go to the grocery shop. They didn't want to go to the grocery shop. Maybe they might have been on their way to a friend's place to maybe play a video game, right? So your objective was to go to a grocery shop and to buy something. But what you did was that you were not able to accomplish that by yourself. So you got help from others. And when you get help from others, they're also getting something in return, right? These two guys, they might have just felt good by helping you. So they're actually getting the feeling of feeling good in return when they're helping you out. Or maybe they're your neighbors. They believe that by helping you today, you might help them back another day. Or if you're paying them, then it's money, so they're getting something in return. So if it's not money, it's some kind of a social capital that is being exchanged there. So you wanted to meet a certain objective, which is to go to a grocery shop. You couldn't do that by yourself, so you got help. It was not their objective. You basically gotten people and aligned them with your objective in exchange of something, right? So that is how organizations are formed. And when when you move from being a full-time employee to a freelancer, what is really, really important is that change in the mindset. The change in the mindset of you being in an organization to you being closer to being an organization, right? So you're not an employee, you are more aligned to an organization when you become a freelancer. So I've created a chart in a graph in the next slide. I'll give you a couple of seconds to just go through it. So you have two axes here. You have on the y-axis is predictability, the x-axis is ambiguity, right? So when you're an employee, you are in a highly predictable environment. You're also in a low ambiguity environment, right? So the environment that you're in is very predictable because organizations have rules, right? It has structures. You know what to do. You know what will happen next if you do something, right? You know, if someone does, you don't get help, you know whom to reach out to. So for everything, there are people that are there to help you out. There are rules that you need to follow, rules everyone needs to follow, and you will have very clear visibility on what will happen when rules are broken. So it's a very predictable environment. It's also a low ambiguous environment because again, you are existing within this framework of an organization. There are rules and structures and systems and procedures in place. So ambiguity is low and predictability is high, right? That's how an employee operates. But if you look at an organization doesn't really operate within a fixed framework. It operates in a very large marketplace. There are a lot of different market forces operating there, a lot of variables. There are political, economic, social, geopolitical, a lot of different factors that affect how they perform in this marketplace. So for an organization, they don't operate in a highly predictable and low ambiguous environment. They operate in a high ambiguous and low predictable environment. The ambiguity is very high, uncertainties and ambiguities are very high. And I think now is the time we all are realizing more than ever that ambiguity is high and predictability is low. So for organizations compared with employees, ambiguity is high and predictability is low because the framework is not as solid for organizations as it is for employees. So when an employee becomes a freelancer, what is happening is that he or she is moving from a highly predictable and low ambiguous environment toward a high ambiguous and low predictable environment. So if you look at the curve, a freelancer would be somewhere in between an employee and an organization. So a lot of questions that we might have as freelancers are not actually the right questions to ask, right? These are questions that we're asking as employees, and we cannot apply those questions as freelancers. As freelancers, we are moving toward being an organization. The kind of questions that we need to ask will have to change. So these are some of the questions that we'll have to ask ourselves when we want to operate successfully as a freelancer, right? One is, how do I build my personal brand? How do I market my services? With whom should I partner? What is my strategy? How do I make sure that I'm being successful? Why should customers work with me rather than with my competitors? Now, in the freelancing world, the competition is really high, especially if you're in a global marketplace. There are people from other countries that you might be competing with. The rates that you quote and the rates that they quote might be different. The skill sets might be different. So you're operating in a more global space. You're competing with more global peers. So competition is very high, and why should you should have the answer to this question: why should the customers work with you rather than with your competitors? And what should I work on, and what should I outsource? Right? You might not be able to work on all the requests from your clients, so maybe outsourcing is something that you should consider. And earlier, companies used to outsource, outsource to specialists, and they used to outsource non-core services. But right now, companies are also outsourcing their core services. So these are all decisions a freelancer also should be able to take, right? Should I do it myself, or should I get someone else to do it, right? So what should I outsource, and what should I actually work on? And should I specialize in the market, and what's the market for my specialization? So I'm a technical writer, so I'll have to ask myself, if I specialize as a technical writer, I might be a really good technical writer, the best technical writer in the country, but what's the market for it as a freelancer? So these are things that we really have to ask ourselves when we are starting out as a freelancer, or if we want to be successful as a freelancer. So these are some questions that we need to ask yourself. And when you're moving from being an employee to being a freelancer, basically when you're moving from thinking like an employee to thinking like an organization, you'll have to also think about a lot of things that an organization thinks about. So we saw some of those questions in the previous slide, and in this slide, I just want you to want to share with you some types of ways. You might have people who are familiar with the Lean and Six Sigma methodologies, might be familiar with the concept of ways, Muda, Mura, Muri, and all of that, right? So these are the different types of ways that you can generate while you're working, right? And one common example is basically overproduction or overprocessing. When I say overproduction, let's say that you are required to create content for a website. So you create the content, you put it inside a Word document, you can send it to the client. But sometimes, let's say I want to really impress the client, so I don't just put it in a Word document and format it and send it to the client. I put the content in a Word document. I add colors. I create decorative borders. I put tables. I make it look really, really good. But what I am not realizing also is that this content will eventually end up in a web page. So no matter what kind of design I do on the page, it doesn't really affect the end product. Doesn't really help the client in any way. So it's basically overproduction. So I'm spending time overproducing something or overprocessing something, while I could have actually worked on something else, worked for a certain other client, or done something that would add me more value or generate more revenue. So this is an example of overproduction. So similarly, you can if you read about these three types of ways, the Mura, Muri, and Muda, you would see that there are different types of ways that are generated, which are really important, which we need to pay attention to when you're a freelancer than when you're an employee. If you're an employee, even if you're over processing, there isn't the revenue that you as an individual is losing. But when you're a freelancer, each of these ways become really, really important, because the time you spend is very important, because the time that you spend is what is actually generating revenue for you. And freelancers do a lot of things. We we sometimes overprocess. We interact with different people. We market our services. There are a lot of different activities that we do to try and improve uh, our income as a freelancer. But one thing that we always need to keep in mind, no matter what we do, no matter what kind of marketing we do, what kind of work we do, what kind of client service we do, one question that we always need to keep in our mind is that, will this help me increase my prices or lower my cost? If it's not helping me increase the price of my services or products or lower the cost that I'm incurring, then it's not an activity that's worth pursuing, right? So whatever I do, I need to align myself with this question. Will it help me increase my prices or lower my costs? This is a question that a lot of organizations also ask themselves. It's a question that we need to keep in mind as freelancers too. Will it help me increase my prices or lower my costs? If it's doing neither, then I should probably not pursue this activity. Okay. So moving on. So we under this section, thinking about an organization, we talked about when an organization comes into existence. We talked about why an employee when becoming a freelancer should start thinking more like an organization that operates in a highly ambiguous and highly unpredictable environment than like an employee who operates in a low ambiguous but highly predictable environment. Then we talked about the different questions that we need to ask ourselves when we are thinking like an organization, when we want to be successful as a freelancer. We talked about the different types of ways, and also the really important question: does the activity that I am pursuing help me increase my price or lower my cost? So the next topic is about personal branding. I know there was a session on personal branding already, but I'll quickly touch upon a few concepts of around personal branding. And again, a question for you. You see that thinking man on the right, so it means it's a question, and we're going to and discuss what you're typing in on the side chat. What is a brand? What are your thoughts about a brand? I'm looking for what your interesting answers. You've given some really amazing answers for the previous activities. So let's start typing in. Do let me know what you think is your brand. Is a brand? What is a brand? Revati says a brand is a value that a person or object adds to their customers' lives. Okay. So Pune, qualities which makes me and my services unique. Swati, what others think about you? Kunal says things others can rely upon without much worry. Devistry, a brand is something that distinguishes a person, product, or service from peers. A brand is an image that becomes synonymous with your personality. Great. Vijay, a brand is the value that an entity, an individual, or an object brings to the table. Is the value that it brings to the table. Awesome. Manisha says it's recognition. Cool. These are all very interesting, very good definitions about the brand. Meta, a brand gives you an identity. Supriya, brand is the qualities, expertise, specialness of what will be offered to the customer. Shivani says it distinguishes from one seller service to the other services. Amazing. So really great, interesting definitions. Customer can easily recognize the products and find out the differences. So I'm really glad none of you said that a brand is a logo or a tagline or any of that, because that's a very common misinterpretation of the brand. Now, there are different ways to look at brand. You have given me some really interesting definitions, and I would also like to share with you another perspective of a brand. Um, you can say, and we can call it maybe an entity. Now, there is this entity or a company or a person. So this entity interacts with different people. Right? You interact with an entity, and you interact through different channels. Right? If it's a company, you will interact with its customer service professionals or employees. You will see their advertisements on newspapers and hoardings and on TV. That's also a form of interaction. You will read their content somewhere. You will be availing their services. If you are a candidate, you might be applying for jobs in that company. You might be talking to the recruiter. So there are different channels through which you're interacting with this entity. And it's the same with person. Even with people, you're interacting through that person through different channels. And when you're interacting with this entity through different channels, you're forming impressions about that entity in your mind, right? You're forming impressions based on your experiences. And the sum total of all these impressions is something that we can call as the brand. So the sum total of all the perceptions that people get about the entity through different channels of interaction, that sum total of that is something that we can call as a brand. So there are a lot of different parameters around the brand that you can measure, but the brand as such, it's intangible. It cannot be measured, right? So brand is the sum total of all these experiences that people go through when they interact with a certain entity through different channels, right? Now, it goes without saying, you will all be in agreement if I say that in order to be a great freelancer, it is important to have a great personal brand. And how do I build this brand as a freelancer? And it ties back to some of the things that we discussed in this presentation earlier, which is one of which is setting goals, right? So you look at this diagram on the next slide. See, the first step to creating a great personal brand is to have a very clear vision or goal or purpose. What is it that I really want to do? What is my freelancing goal? Or even if it is not freelancing, what is basically my goal, right? So once I have identified my goal, then I have to do the brand positioning or create a brand positioning statement, right? Maybe my brand positioning statement is that I want to be the best technical writer in Kerala. That might be my brand positioning statement. And I might have figured out that by being the best technical writer in Kerala, I will be able to more easily or better achieve my goal or purpose, whatever that may be. Right. So I've set my goal or purpose. And in order to achieve my goal or purpose, I'm saying this is the brand, this is the personal brand that will help me achieve this goal or purpose. So once I have identified my goal or purpose, and again, a goal or purpose, goals or purposes need to be smart goals. It's very important. So we set smart goals, then we create a brand positioning statement. And once we have the brand positioning statement, we start the brand building activities. And brand building activities will involve customizing your online profile, building your portfolio, building your elevator pitches, and all of that. So those are all brand building activities that you're all familiar with already. And I think some of it has been covered in a previous session as well. So you set your goal or purpose, you create a brand positioning statement, and then you start building the brand. But what's really important, what is really important for you to remember is the tip of the iceberg idea. Does anyone know what this means from a brand perspective? What does it mean when you say, it's the tip of the iceberg? Any thoughts you want to share on the chat? Revati says tip of the iceberg is a glimpse. Anything else? Any thoughts from a brand perspective? What do we mean by the tip of the iceberg? Tip of the iceberg is a glimpse. What is visible to all? Yes, it is a glimpse. It's what is visible to all. Now, brand itself. So Vijay, building a brand is just a small part of the entire effort toward meeting one's goal. And spot on, right? So the brand itself is the tip of an iceberg, and that's something a lot of us miss while we're trying to build a personal or professional brand, right? So when you say the tip of the iceberg, what we're saying is that it's the tip of the iceberg is what is above the water. What is below the water is much, much bigger. So you don't see what is there below the water. You just see the tip of the iceberg. So your brand is basically the tip of the iceberg, right? It's what everyone sees. It's the brand positioning, the perception, the online profiles, whatever it is that is there, whatever other people see, that's the tip of the iceberg. What's below the water, what people don't see, the purpose, the values, the skills, beliefs, the hard work, the experience that you have, the learning that you have put in. These are all what is below the water, right? So if what is above the water, the tip of the iceberg needs to be strong, what is below the water needs to be really, really strong. So if my brand positioning is to be the best technical writer in Kerala, I shouldn't just work on what is above the water, the tip of the iceberg. I should also work on what is below the water, what the others don't see. So eventually, it will be safe to say that if I want to be seen as the best technical writer in Kerala, I have to be the best technical writer in Kerala, right? So the tip of the iceberg is how you position yourself. But in order for your brand to be successful, what is below the water, what is that layer that people don't see, should also be strong. And some of what is below the surface are the purpose, values, skills, beliefs, hard work, experience, learning, and all of that. There are a lot more, right? But this is a concept that we always need to remember, that brand is just the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot below the surface. In order to have a successful brand, we really need to work on the invisible aspects of the brand, right? So moving on, the next topic that we're going to talk about. So under brands, we talked about what a brand is, and we talk about how we can create the steps that we need to take to create a great brand, which is first to have a clear, smart goal, and have a brand positioning statement, and then do the and then do the brand building. And we also looked at how a brand is the tip of the iceberg, and brand is the tip of the iceberg, and below the surface, what people don't see is where a lot of work is required. So for you to have a successful brand, you will have to work on not just building the brand, but also on building or strengthening those areas that are below the water. Okay. So the next topic is networking. So it's a very, very easy, simple topic, but at the same time, it's really important for freelancers. Uh, while you're a freelancer, it is really important that you stay well networked. I've put on this screen some of the most common groups of people that you can be networked with, and you can partner with them and do great work. So ad agencies is an obvious. So ad agencies, they do outsource work. So if you're a freelancer that has connections with ad agencies, you can propose taking up work. Designers and content writers, they often collaborate, and together they create work for clients. You can work with authors to proofread or edit their work. There are agents that connect freelancers with people that are looking for services. So being in touch with agents will also really help. You can also collaborate with other freelance writers. Let's say I'm a copywriter, and if I collaborate with a technical writer, so we can share clients and we can make sure that our clients' services are always there between the two of us, and we are also able to provide more services, take up more work, and generate more revenue. There are online portals. There are quite a lot of online portals these days, and having a great profile on those online portals, visiting them regularly, are all things that we need to do. Companies and corporates that you can stay in touch with, because there are companies that outsource work to freelancers, and having a strong network with leaders that in companies that outsource freelance content work would be very helpful. SEO and SEM specialists, so people that do search engine optimization, search engine marketing, social media marketing. They work very closely with content. Not a lot of them might be content writers or editors. So being in touch with them will help us get more work. Project managers that manage whole projects. One of those aspects that they might manage would be content. So being in touch with project managers would also be helpful. So it's important that whenever you get the opportunity, you interact and create connections with people from these different groups and companies, and that will increase your chances of being successful. Networking is a really important part of being freelancing, and when you're networking, it's important to be emotionally intelligent. These are basically, for further reading, you can look up emotional intelligence, empathy, body language, and mirroring. And one of my teachers on networking and empathy and emotional intelligence, he told me something. He gave me this line that I'll never forget, which is, people like people who are like we naturally tend to like people who are like them. We tend to connect faster and more easily with people who are like us. And there are very easy ways to prove this theory. If you are in a meeting room with your colleagues, you would see that people who are in agreement have a more or less similar body language. They have a more similar posture. People who are not in agreement, they don't have a similar posture. It's basically called mirroring, right? You mirror the body language of people that you are in agreement with. You will, when you're having a conversation, and if you observe very carefully, you will see that when you are in agreement with someone, the other person is mirroring your body language, or you are subconsciously mirroring the other person's body language. So under networking, being aware of body language techniques, empathy, emotional intelligence, these are all really important. And the idea that people like people who are like them, something that has helped me a lot. It's something that I will always remember. But what I would encourage you to do is network with these different groups of people that you see on the screen, and also learn more about emotional intelligence, empathy, and body language. And these are all concepts that will come in handy while you're networking. Right? And we are kind of nearing the end of the presentation. And finally, I would like to share with you some do's and don'ts. These are not exhaustive, but based on my interactions with some people, aspiring freelancers, I've found out these are things that we need to be careful about. One is getting into verbal agreements, not documenting the agreements that we reach into with clients or with our collaborators. Standardizations, or I should, for lack of a better word, say mindless standardization. Work is kind of complex. So writing and content is a slightly complex subjective area, and we need to give due importance to the complexity and subjectivity that is involved. Sometimes we go ahead and standardize mindlessly things that we cannot standardize. For example, not for all types of content can we quote a per word quote or a per page quote. The complexity might be different, right? In order to create a 2-word ad, you might take 2-3 weeks or months. Right. So the effort that is involved isn't actually the typing, but also the thinking and the research that goes behind. So sometimes we standardize a lot of things without understanding fully the complexity that is involved. Diversification. We in one of the previous slides, we talked about how understanding what your specialization is, and also understanding the market for that specialization, is important, right? I might be a great copywriter, but what is the demand for copywriting, right? Maybe if there is not a lot of demand for copywriting, I should consider diversifying into other skill sets. I should probably try proofreading or technical writing or something else. I might have to upskill myself and also diversify to minimize risk. So diversification will help you minimize risk. And it's like maintaining your portfolio of investments. Some might be high risk and high return, some might be low risk, but it might be more stable. There might be a certain type of work that you get on a regular basis, but the income that it generates might not be high. But in order to make up for the revenue, you can make sure that you are taking up once in a while work that might not be stable but provides you high returns, right? So that is a strategy that you can consider. And under diversification, there are also concepts called forward integration, backward integration. It might be too technical, but I can just quickly share some examples with you. Let's assume that I'm creating content for a blog, right? My client is asking me to create content for a blog, and this blog content would be published on a WordPress website. So he is reaching out to me to create content for a blog. I create content, send it back to him or her in a Word document. Forward integration would be me also learning WordPress and offering to the client to not just create the content but also publish the content on the WordPress platform. So what I'm doing is I'm forward integrating into publishing. Now I don't just create content, I also publish content that gives me an opportunity to make more money. And before creating the blog, the client or he might have engaged someone to do some research. So now I can offer to the client to not just create the content and publish it, but also to do the research that goes into creation of the content. So I'm now doing the research, creating the content, and I am also publishing the content. I'm sorry. Okay. So I'm also publishing the content, right? So when I'm creating content and I'm also going into research, what I'm doing is I'm doing backward integration. So there are a few things that happens when you diversify and you integrate forward and backward. One is that you stand a chance of earning more when you integrate that way, and two, you are creating barriers for other people to enter, right? So it's easy for you to be replaced if you are a content writer by another content writer. But now when you're forward integrating and also backward integrating, it's difficult for you to be replaced, right? It's not easy to find for the client to find someone who just does the it might be easy for them to find someone who does the writing, but not easy for them to find someone who does the research, has the background of all the research that has been done, does the writing, and also does the publishing. That combination might be hard to find. So you're diversifying and you're reducing risk, increasing your income, and you're also creating more barriers to entry. So that's it about diversification. Then you have learning. We talked about learning in the past. It's really the best competitive advantage. If you're not learning, then you're really not keeping up to date. Learning is extremely important. Making learning a habit is very important. You might have heard that readers are leaders, leaders are readers. So learning is important. And SWOT and strategy. You might have seen SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Analyzing what your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are important, and leveraging that to come up with your strategy. What are your strengths, weaknesses? What are the opportunities that you have? What are your threats? What is the competition looking like? And how can I put all these together and come up with a strategy that will make me a good freelancer? So taking a step back from your day-to-day routine and coming up with a strategy and a goal, and as a result of the strategy and the goal, a brand positioning statement, and then working on what is above and below the water. So all of that is important. So taking a step back from your day-to-day activity of just creating content and looking at your strategy is very important. So these are some of the additional points that I wanted to share with you. When you're trying to be a successful freelancer. So in summary, these are the things that we looked at. We first looked at why we love writing, and we looked at some interesting aspects of the human language. And then we looked at this idea that if you can do it for the joy, you can do it forever. So Stephen King, he didn't write for the money, he wrote it for the joy, and he can do it forever. Then we talked about making learning a habit. We looked at the names of some of the great writers that ever lived and why it's important for us to learn from those great writers and read their books. And we talked about reading for writers, or critical reading, where you read not just for the information, but also to understand how it is written and analyze how it's written. And we said that, agreed that learning is a competitive advantage, and that it's important to make learning a habit because habits equate to results. And then we talked about setting freelancing goals, converting your ambitions and dreams into smart goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound goals, and how setting smart goals can expedite your making of your dreams come true. So the importance of setting freelancing goals and converting your ambitions into smart goals. We talked about thinking like an organization. We looked at when an organization comes into existence, which is when one person realizes that he or she would not be able to do something by himself or herself. Then we looked at how, when you're moving from an employee to a freelancer, you are moving from a low ambiguity, high predictability environment to a high ambiguity, low predictability environment, and why it's important for us to start thinking about organization if you want to be a successful freelancer. We talked about going lean and why it's important for us to eliminate waste. And also this one important question, in addition to the work that you do, all the other activities that you undertake will have to help you reduce the costs or increase the prices. right? So that's one question that we always need to be aligned to. And then we looked at building a personal brand. We talked about what a brand is, and it's basically the perceptions that people have about you when they interact with you through different channels. Then we talked about the importance of goal setting and the steps that are involved in creating a brand, which is to first set a smart goal, then create a brand positioning statement, and once you've created the brand positioning statement, do the activities that are involved in brand building. We also discussed that a brand is the tip of the iceberg. It's just what you see above the water. For the tip of the iceberg, for your brand to be strong, it's important that you strengthen what is below the water, the things that are invisible. So we looked at building a personal brand. And then finally, under networking, we talked about the ecosystem of ecosystem of people that you need to network with. And we also talked about a few topics around emotional intelligence that you can read further about. And also, one of my all-time favorite lessons: people like people who like them, right? So that's summary of what we have learned so far. At the start of the session, I said that I love writing for a lot of different reasons, because there are so many different languages, and because language helps us define the experience the way they are defined, and also because language is basically what makes humans humans. There is one more thing that I really love about language, which is that every word we speak or write changes the state of the world just a little bit, right? Everything that we say, everything that we write, it changes the state of the world. When I say something, the state of the world is slightly different than what it was before I said something. So it changes the state of the world just a little bit. It changes the state by in three ways: by triggering action. What I say might trigger action. What I say might trigger thought. What I say might also change mindset. So language is a really powerful. It's a powerful system that we have, because it has the ability to change the state of the world a little bit. By very wisely using the language, we can bring about a positive change to the state of the world. And this is one of the really important reasons why I love languages and why I love working with languages and words a lot. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for patiently sitting through the session and listening to me, and for um, sharing your thoughts on the side chat. Like I said earlier, we talked about the habits and mindsets. If you want to discuss further, I've shared my number. Just feel free to ping me on this number on WhatsApp. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to have a conversation about what we discussed. And also, if you are trying to become a freelancer, if you need any help somewhere, if you're stuck with a certain client, and you're not sure how to manage a client, you need advice on a certain project, just feel free to ping me, and I'm happy to help you as best as I can. So thank you so much. I'll pause there and give it back to Revati to see if there are any questions, or you can post your questions on the side chat if you want to. Um, if not,
Yeah.
we'll all say goodbye.
Yeah. So if anyone has any questions, that you can write it on the chat, or you can feel free to unmute yourself and speak as well. Vijay asks, "Hi Shrikesh, could you please display the slide displaying the names of some greater writers?"
Sure, Vijay. I'll go back to that slide. There you are. These are the authors, some of the greatest or the best books on writing. Thank you, Vijay.
And so when you see a lot of competition in this space, how do you try to keep yourself at it and not give up?
So thanks for that question, Revati. So it's basically the whole presentation that is the answer to your questions. By building habits and mindsets that will give me a competitive advantage. So it's by learning, thinking like an organization, loving, identifying what I'm doing, and doing that over and over again, and becoming an expert at it. So it's basically by sticking with the habits and mindsets that will make you a successful
Yeah, I
freelancer.
think, yeah, and you said that you gotta love what you do. So that probably just is. If you love
I
it, you
agree.
probably won't be so bothered about whether you're. I mean, you'll just eventually start doing well.
Mhm.
Does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Or you can write on the chat. I don't know if anyone is typing or it's.
Okay. All right. So if
Okay.
there are no questions, I'm happy to continue the conversation. Through the groups that we're all part of.
Yeah,
Okay.
Vijay has
So
a question.
Vijay has a question. As a freelancer, how do you ensure that you get paid as per what is agreed initially? I think it is important to have written documentation, and not get into verbal agreements. But when you're a freelancer, there is always a risk that you might not be paid what has been agreed to. So the decision is up to us. So one, if you find out that you have not been paid, or the client is not willing to pay after the work has been done, it is unlike in an organization where you can go ahead and speak with the HR or the finance that you have not received your salary. There is no such body. If there are associations that you are part of, you can probably get help from them to initiate action against the client that has not been paying. Otherwise, the only option is to actually basically get in consultation get in touch with a lawyer, and take things forward legally. But that's a decision that we all have had to take as freelancers. So is it worth taking legal action, or should I put it down to learning and move on? So the only two options are to make sure that we are documenting whatever that we're agreeing, and if things still don't go well, take legal action.
Anyone else? So thank you so much, Rikesh. We often think of freelancing as a flexible alternative to mainstream working, but your session, I think, has shown a very different perspective. There's a lot of hard work, consistency, and perseverance that goes into being successful in freelancing, and identifying the goal, thinking like an organization, strategizing, building your brand. I think you spoke about in this industry so much. Uh, so, in heartfelt thanks from all of us at STC India and all the participants here for a great session. I'm sure we all have a lot to take back with us. Thank you everyone for joining in on a Saturday morning. I'll send you all the recording of the session, and I look forward to your feedback on the session as well. If, like Shrikesh said, if you have any specific questions and you want to ask him that, feel free to do so, or you can send it across to me and I can forward it to him as well. With that, I think we can close, and you have all of you have a great weekend. Stay safe. Take care. Thanks, Shrikesh. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Revati. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.